Hey YouTube, it's ICU, and today I have an interesting update to discuss with you in the realm of iOS and kind of jailbreaking, though the jailbreak segment will occur more toward the end of this video. So if you're on the desktop version of YouTube and that's the only section that interests you, there will be a skip annotation up on your screens right now, or down below in the more info, there is a table of contents. We're going to be talking about why Pangu released their jailbreak for iOS 9.1 and the advantage that that utility would have over something for iOS 9.2.1, the current public firmware as of recording today's video. Just note though that I wanted to create an entirely separate video discussing that very topic, so we're not going to go too into depth today. With that said, let's go ahead and switch on over to Safari here, because today Apple seeded iOS 9.3 Beta 7 to registered developers, as well as the corresponding version for public beta testers. So yes, we're only 1 week from when we thought the last beta was released. iOS 9.3 Beta 6, we're here today with iOS 9.3 Beta 7, and as you can see when we get a close-up there, we have an entirely new build number. It actually lists 2 builds, which is relatively strange, but for the post date down below, it does confirm that Beta 7 was released today, March 14th, 2016, and most of you are probably wondering what changes Beta 7 has to offer over its predecessor. Well, unfortunately, just like Beta 6, we have no clue what revisions the new beta iteration actually offers, though they're likely trivial since we don't know and since there aren't any apparent modifications inside of Beta 7. They could very well just be minor performance enhancements and just general tweaks, Apple trying to make sure that they get the absolutely most stable version of iOS 9.3 out as possible. And its lackluster state as far as features are concerned are definitely reflected in its update size. On this iPhone here, which is actually running iOS 9.3 Beta 6, when we go inside of Settings, General, Software Update, you'll notice we do have an available update for Beta 7. It lists it as only being 41.7 megabytes. Other devices are all the way up to 60 megabytes, though either way, it's still a very small iOS update. Again, just an incremental change. Apple readying iOS 9.3 for release to the public, ironing out all of the possible bugs that still persisted in the 6th beta. And as for release goes for iOS 9.3, as you'll recall, since I released the last beta update video for Beta 6, Apple has confirmed their March 21st media event. Now, this event is expected to play host to the unveiling of not only the iPhone SE, the rumored lower cost 4-inch iPhone with upgraded specs very similar to the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus models, as well as an iPad Air 3, which again, rumors are kind of pegging as the lower end 9.7-inch iPad Pro. So not as expensive and not as big of a screen real estate as what we have on the current iPad Pro, though it may actually adopt the iPad Pro name. It's also expected that Apple could unveil new Apple Watch bands at the event, and it's most likely that they will release iOS 9.3 to the general public either following the event or in the days following it, because both the new 4-inch iPhone as well as the iPad are expected to be released later that week, most likely on the Friday following the 21st, and they're expected to launch and ship with iOS 9.3 pre-installed, meaning it has to be released before then. Now, this is actually where we can get into jailbreaking, because Pangu did something very unexpected earlier. A few days ago, they released a new utility or an updated version of their Pangu 9 jailbreak to include support for iOS 9.1, which seems absolutely redundant, right? iOS 9.1 hasn't been the latest public firmware for months, and since then, it has been succeeded by both iOS 9.2 and 9.2.1. So what the heck were they doing? Why did they waste time developing a new utility for iOS 9.1 when we're currently stuck on iOS 9.2.1? Well, the answer to that question is very simple. They actually didn't waste time on it because they didn't discover the primary exploit themselves. When we hop on over here to Twitter, following the release of their utility, they give direct credit right here to another developer, Loki Hart, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, but he was the one who actually discovered the new kernel exploit utilized in the Pangu 9 version 1.3.0 utility, which is really the primary exploit that was patched by Apple in iOS 9.1. So let me quickly break it down for you. Without opening up all of the security documents, you can actually go back and find them yourselves just by searching for iOS 9.1 security security changes, and the same exact thing for 9.2 and 9.2.1. Apple actually patched more bugs for the Pangu jailbreak utility in iOS 9.2 and 9.2.1 than they did inside of iOS 9.1. There was little for them to actually do to upgrade their previous Pangu jailbreak for iOS 9.0.2 to include support for iOS 9.1. They actually spent little time themselves other than just testing it, which is the most they've actually done, because they didn't have to discover that entirely new kernel exploit. As I mentioned previously, Pangu and or Taiji most likely would not release a jailbreak for a firmware that wasn't being signed unless other developers discovered the key vulnerabilities for those jailbreak utilities, and then all Pangu really had to do was to just roll that exploit into what already existed. So that's why it's key. That's why they released a jailbreak, just to hold those of you currently on iOS 9.1 over until they can actually get everything ready for iOS 9.3. Because I'm here to tell you that once 9.3 drops, we're not going to see a jailbreak utility immediately. We never, ever do. It usually takes at least 1 to 2 weeks following the release of a targeted firmware for jailbreak developers to then release a utility that supports it. So that's why that's absolutely key, because if a new firmware being iOS 9.3 isn't released until next week, then it could even still be a few weeks on top of that before we see another jailbreak for the latest public firmware. So a new utility right now would not only take a lot of time, but it would also be wasted, seeing as iOS 9.3 is just a week away, and all they had to do for the iOS 9.1 upgrade was basically just swap out that main kernel bug, and there was one other thing that they had to address in it as well, as opposed to swapping out the majority of the bugs to include support for iOS 9.2.1. So that's why we currently have a jailbreak for iOS 9.1. It's just to hold us over. It's not the end of jailbreaking. There will be new jailbreak utilities coming soon. Just be sure to stay tuned. Click the subscribe button below next to my channel name if you have yet to, and if you're interested in actually getting on iOS 9.3 right now, maybe you're on a previous beta, or maybe you're even on iOS 9.2.1 and you're thinking about checking it out, then you definitely can. I will actually have a link in your cards right now to my video discussing how to update to iOS 9.3, though it's very simple. And I will also have some additional resources there, including the changes found inside of the upcoming iOS 9.3 firmware, because we didn't go over them today in this video, because remember, there are really no changes inside of beta 7 over beta 6 or beta 5, at least no noticeable ones that the end user will actually be able to pick out and determine. So that's why there's some resources in your cards if you want additional information on iOS 9.3. Remember to stay tuned. I'm going to have so much new coverage for you guys in the days to come. I'm planning some very exciting things in addition to iOS 9.3, jailbreaking, and Apple's March 21st event, so be sure to stay tuned. Like I said, click the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss out. Give this video a big thumbs up if you appreciated the info in it. If you want more updates, just be sure to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. And until next time, this is ICU signing out. Join the iCrack Your iDevice community on Patreon to help out the channel and to be featured in videos similar to these top contributors. Click the link on your screens now if you're on desktop, or check below.